Hi, friends. Thank you again for joining us on Food for Thought. This is a ministry out of Christ Episcopal Church, and my name is Sunil Tandy, rector and priest here at Christ Episcopal Church in Rhode Island. And again, we want to thank you for being with us. And so if you are here with us at this time, today is a live show, and it's a live interaction, and I hope that you will touch base with us. Tell us that you're here. Tell us that you're connecting with us. Tell us how you're doing, and if this serves to meet your needs in some way of connecting with you in all the various challenges that we all face in life. And again, thank you for being with us. So we have a great guest today, and he will be amazing to hear. And of course, part of the intent of this program is to help us glean wisdom in order to handle the challenges we face on a day-to-day basis. And the primary challenge right at this moment for the global community is the COVID-19 situation. But these insights will always help us through any other future challenges as well. One of the, at the very beginning of each program, I begin with a food for thought, and usually it's based on the lessons for this coming Sunday, because of course I need to touch base and learn and go over the lessons for the sermon for Sunday. And this Sunday's first lesson is from Jeremiah. This is actually from the fourth Sunday, because I had to do the preaching on the fourth Sunday. But the lesson is from Jeremiah, and I love this passage from Jeremiah chapter 1, verses 4 through 10. Now the word of the Lord came to me, saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. And then it goes on. I love that particular passage, that verse, because it just makes me have this understanding that God knew us before we were even formed, and loved us even before we were created and conceived of, and so we were conceived in the mind of God. That's the thing I get out of this. That's so powerful for me. But I don't think this is what I really think is the most interesting part of that book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah, as you know, is a prophet. He's the lamenting prophet. He's the one who we attribute Lamentations to. And the reason why he's lamenting is because he was a prophet during the time of Israel's or Judah's exile into Babylon. And it was a hard time to be a prophet. And so when he is saying, before I formed you, I knew you, and before you were born, I consecrated you, I appointed you a prophet to the nation, Jeremiah must have thought to himself, why? I don't want to be a prophet now. It's like the worst time to be a prophet of God to the nations, because the nations are gone. I mean, my nation is gone. And so Jeremiah is a prophet during a very tough time, a challenging time in Israel's history, in Judah's history. And but there is something that, for those of you who might not know, Israel was one nation, two nations. It divided into two nations after King David and King Solomon. And then it became Judah and northern Israel. Northern Israel was conquered by the Assyrians, and then the Babylonians came and took them. And then Judah was a nation by itself, and then eventually they were conquered by Babylon, and it was destroyed, virtually destroyed. And the best and the brightest were taken away into exile into Babylon, and even Jeremiah was said to have gone into exile with the rest of the nation. And so he's preaching to a nation that doesn't have a nation, doesn't have a place. And it's interesting, in the 29th chapter of Jeremiah, it changes his way. There's a transition, because in the 29th chapter of Jeremiah, which is really interesting, he says, "This is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says to all those I carried into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. build houses, settle down, plant gardens, eat what they produce, marry and have sons and daughters. Find wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, so that they too may have sons and daughters. Increase in number there, do not decrease. Seek also the prosperity and the peace of the city, and pray to the Lord, because as it prospers, you will prosper. And it goes on to say that I haven't left you. The Lord God hasn't left you. It's interesting, because what I think the prophet is saying is adapt to the situation. Look at the situation that you have, adapt. Don't just look at the past and stay in the past, but engage in the challenge that you have in the present and adapt. And know that God is with you, walking with you in the midst of this adaptation. I mean, that's a pretty powerful thing, because God isn't just the God of Israel and Judah back in geographical Judah, but God is the God who walks with us all the way through into our challenge, into the places where we are. And God engages with us. And incidentally, scholars suggest that this is the reason why the Hebrew faith survived into this century. The Jewish faith survived into this century. It's because of the exilic period and all of the connections that they made, and the people who kept their faith intact and learned what they could through their challenge. And then when they went back to Israel, they were able to bring those learnings back to the geographical place. I think adaptation is part of what we are called to do today. In the midst of this COVID crisis, we're called to adapt to what is before us, not just bemoan the situation, but to engage and to try something. Our guest today is someone who loves to try things, and he is known nationally in our Episcopal Church, and as one who is an innovator and a thinker. And I have his bio in front of me, and I'd like to read it to you. Our guest is the Reverend Lorenzo Lebrija. Father Lorenzo is the founding director of TryTank, the experimental lab for church growth and innovation. He's responsible for the entire process of development and implementation of experiments for innovation in the church. Prior to launching TryTank, Lorenzo was the Chief Development Officer for the Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles. He was also served as a pastor on behalf of the bishop at St. John's Episcopal Church in San Bernardino, California, and as a priest associate at St. Athanasius Episcopal Church at the Cathedral Center of St. Paul's in Los Angeles. He studied at General Theological Seminary, my old seminary, in New York City, where he earned the Master of Divinity degree. Before entering the seminary, Lorenzo was president and CEO of Seraphic, Fire and Firebird Chamber Orchestra, Miami's professional choral and orchestral ensemble. He was also the Miami program director for the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, responsible for the substantial grant portfolio and the launch of the Knight's Arts Challenge. Having been general manager for RadioActiva Hispanic Radio, as well as the editor and director of operations for Miami's community newspapers. Lorenzo has vast experience in media and marketing. He has been a frequent speaker at community events to groups on development, community involvement, the arts, business strategy, and marketing. Beyond the MDiv, he also has an MBA and a BA from Florida International University, has completed the full training at the fundraising school at the Indiana University, and is a certified foresight practitioner from the Institute for the Future in Palo Alto, California, and has a certificate in design thinking from IDEO in Palo Alto, California, and is a graduate of Rice University's Executive Education Program. He's also written this wonderful book, How to Try. And it's a wonderful book on design thinking and church innovation. Ben, please bring us Father Lorenzo.
Hey, how are you?
Doing great. How are you?
Every time I hear my bio, I'm like, I am really getting old. I've done a lot. I should just I'm ready for retirement. Can I just It's a good thing I already live in Palm Springs because I'm ready for retirement. Let's just go ahead. And I'm already here. I'm so glad that you invited me. I'm glad to be here with you today. And you know, I was listening to your comments as you were talking about Jeremiah and being a prophet. And you're a prophet. You know, you're in the work that you're doing. And anytime that we stand up and we say love wins, we're prophets. Anytime that we stand up and say God's not done here, we're prophets. Anytime. So I think in all of the work that we do, we're all called to be prophets. But I couldn't help but laugh when you said, because for Jeremiah, that was a hard time to be a prophet. And I was like, was there ever a good time to be a prophet?
Sure. You're right. You're absolutely right.
Was there ever a prophet like, you know, I am so glad God chose me for this. This is an amazing thing.
Because they killed the prophets, right?
I know. And they were never liked in their hometown. They're always killed. You're always telling someone something they don't want to hear. So it's like,
I know. And but I mean, I could especially, I mean, I know why. I could just sense why he's called the lamenting prophet. Why, oh God, did you give me this right now?
Exactly. I think he just complained more than most. That's all. But I mean, look at Jonah. He ran away the other direction. I mean, no prophet was ever like, wow, I totally, although maybe, I don't know, maybe Samuel. He kind of sort of like walked right into that and was like, yeah, I totally like this.
Yeah. That's right.
He was like, okay, yeah, sure. Here I am, Lord.
Wow. Well, Lorenzo, I think you're a prophet. I think you're giving us a new way of thinking. And I think part of it is like, especially during this time where, you know, in the pandemic, I mean, we're just going through the Omicron version of it, right? And but our churches are there's a sense of malaise. I have a feeling in some churches, there in some places, even this morning, I was talking to one of our community leaders who's Jewish, and he's saying that even in the Jewish community and in all of our community, there's this, we're all very tired.
Oh yeah.
We feel like there's a feeling of being burnt out almost.
Yeah.
And then the prophets, the role of the prophet is say, hey, look, there's still hope. God is in this. And we've got to keep trying to do stuff and trying to engage.
And I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, but you're absolutely right. There are a lot of our colleagues who are just tired. This has been the trauma that is coming from this is something we're going to have to deal with for a long time. Yeah. But I was just reading a book called Apollo's Arrow. And in the book, it's from an epidemiologist who has studied pandemics. And he's basically talking about what the lasting impact of COVID is going to be. And I can tell you, according to him, we're only halfway through. We will not be done with this. This is just a cycle still. So we're sort of like towards the end of the middle part. And what he's saying is that we're likely to see another dip, and the summer will come and we'll be like, yay, we're free again. And then the winter will come and some other sort of variant will come about, and it'll just sort of be another cycle of it again. What he's saying is that it probably will not be till the end of 23 when we're going into 24 when it becomes more endemic. It is just something that we're going to live with. It's just going to be, we're going to get boosters every year, and this is going to be just part of our lives. But the psychological impact of what this pandemic has done, I think it should be questioning all of us right now, especially if we do believe that we're not yet done, and all the evidence suggests that. We really have to look at, one, how are we taking care of ourselves? Because you cannot just continue to run 100 miles an hour forever. That's 4 years of 100 miles an hour is way too long. There's no way you can do that. You're going to burn out. And so, and we've seen it, right, with the Great Resignation was some of that. We're going to see a little bit, I think, of a Great Resignation within the church itself. Yeah. As some of our colleagues decide that this was just way more than what they could handle. So there's that, but also it's an opportunity, I think, for us to look at everything that we're doing and to say, what matters? What should we still be doing? What is our purpose? What's our why? And how do we sort of, from that, grab onto the things that still matter and let go of some of the others, and know that it is okay to let go of some of the others?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this is in a moment. and that will continue to have lasting effects.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Do you hear an echo? I hear somewhat of an echo, but no, I got
I
it now.
don't know.
I get it. I got it now, so which is good. But I'd love to talk about this book and about your the efforts around TryTank, Tank, and I think it's just a wonderful book. I love it, and I want to read some parts of it too. But how did you come up with the whole process?
Design thinking. So when we launched TryTank, so what we at TryTank do, and for any of your viewers who don't know, what we try to do is we try to figure out sort of like, where's the church going to be in 10 years? That seems to be a good for those of us who consider ourselves sort of futurists, right? That we're trained at looking sort of ahead a little bit and 10 years is a good amount of time because a lot can happen in 10 years. Facebook had 1 user and then within 10 years had 2 billion. Right. So it was, and we saw the massive change that has brought about. So 10 years is a good amount of time. And so we try to look ahead more or less 10 years, try to figure out where the church is going to be. And then if it's a scenario that we like, we can be like, oh, how do we sort of align more towards something in that area? So technology, for example, how do we use more of technology? And some people know we created an Alexa app. Skill is what it's called. And so if it's a good party trick, by the way, if you're at someone's home and they have an Alexa skill, just say, hey, Alexa, open Episcopal prayer. And she'll say, the Lord be with you. And you're like, well, and also with you. And then you pray the daily office. But about 500 people on an ongoing basis are now praying the daily office with Alexa. So it's an opportunity. So technology is one of those things. But there's some things that we probably don't want to happen, right? We've seen the numbers of young people that just are not turning to church. And so the question then becomes for us, how do we try to do different things that may attract them? We know, for example, that, and we've learned this from our evangelical brothers and sisters, Thursday nights are a good time for younger people to go to church. So if we are not focused that only Sunday matters, right, that we could do it on another night, then Thursday night, we now know of certain churches where Thursday night is their biggest service of the week because the weekend has gotten so busy and people that lost, we've seen the numbers dropping. We more or less can tell that about 30% of the people in our churches will not be coming back even once this pandemic is done because they will have lost what some are terming the church going habit. And what that means is that they decided that, hey, church is closed, it was under lockdown and they're with their families and they're like, oh, I can just watch it later on my own, or I can just hang out with my friends and then I'll go to church every once in a while. And so, but Thursday night is a beautiful time for them because like, oh, I just went to work, so I can go from work to church, still experience it, and it doesn't take away from my weekend. So that's what we try to do. We try to look ahead and figure out, are there things that we want to do? Are there things that we don't want to do? How do we try to perhaps curb them so that the impact is not as large? And so when we were first starting, we were like, okay, how do we do this work? What sort of framework can we follow? We can't just sit there and be like, every time come up with a framework. So I looked at frameworks from McKinsey, the consulting company. I looked at frameworks from the scientific method. I looked at frameworks from all over. There's a ton of frameworks. The one that seems to work the most was design thinking because it is centered on the people. It is centered on the user. The ultimate user was created for business. So it's centered on who's going to be the one. And if you think about it, church is about relationships. Church is about people. So we were like, oh, this works. And so far it's worked beautifully. And not to take away from sales of my own book, but it's really only 3 steps that are design thinking. One is you do the discovery phase where you're like, oh, how do we find out the most we can about whatever we're trying to do? Then 2, we come up with ideas. And 3, we figure out a minimum viable prototype so we can go out and try it without betting the house. And it's a simple process, but you notice how I didn't say it was an easy process. It takes time. And most of us in church, by the way, usually begin at step number 2. So you and I would say, hey, we need to reach young people. And you and I would sit around a beautiful table with a whole bunch of other people with a lot of gray hair. And we'd be like, let's reach young people. And we'd be like, oh, we should totally, I've heard of this thing called MySpace, or I've heard of this other thing, or we should do video games. And then we create something, not knowing what young people are really into, just based on our knowledge. So that's how most of the church usually does it. We sit around, we're well meeting, and we come up with ideas. We're missing the discovery phase that can inform our ideas. If we go out there and we interview young people and we say, hey, what are you all into? When is the time, if you had to pick a time that you had to go to church for 1 hour, when would be the most likely time that you would go to church? And we would find out information from them. Then all of a sudden we'd be like, oh, based on this information, what ideas can we come up with to create something for those young people? So you notice the difference. It's as I think I said in my book, it's a difference between you and I saying, hey, let's go west. You're like, okay, let's go west. I guess we could take a plane, or we could drive, or we could probably take a train even. Or we say, hey, let's go to Los Angeles. Then it's like, oh, okay, now I know the best way to get there is to get on a plane from this place to that place, right? You're much more likely to get there because you have much more of a clear path of what you want to do. So that's how we came up with this process for us, which is design thinking, and it works beautifully so far.
Well,
so far.
I know, and you know what? I just want to follow up real quickly on this. It's kind of like it was freeing, because usually it's kind of like spaghetti on the wall, right? You throw whatever you can up on the wall, see what sticks, right? And what you're with this process, it's more efficient. There's a lot less energy expended in ways that you might not really have thought through. I mean, so. In particular, I like the part about when the preparation, the research phase, right? You say, do the research, find out articles, look at what the trends are, go use Google, right? And then you go, and then further, you interview people too. Yes. You sit down and say, these are the things that, that work. Like, the Thursday night, that's an interesting, insight. And then you see whether it works for your particular community too.
Exactly. And by finding out, sometimes it's being able to see, oh, look at what they're doing over there. That sounds really interesting. Perhaps that's something we should look at. But I would never say to you, hey, go and start a Thursday night service. I would say, if you're interested in that, let's figure out whether or not that's a thing for you. And there's a couple of things you could do. You could certainly interview people and talk to people. Be like, would anyone of your current congregation, would anyone be interested in Thursday as opposed to Sunday? Just sort of see what percentage of people might come. 2, find out from others who might be the target that you're trying to reach. Like, hey, is this something that would be of interest? What would it look like? What would it feel like to you? What would be the experience? And then you can even go as far as, for example, launching a page within your website that says, for more information, sign up here, and then run some ads on Facebook that say, we're starting a Thursday night service. This is sort of what it's going to look like. You spend, $100 advertising it before you've even done a service, and just find out whether or not people click. If you run ads around your geography and nobody clicks on a Thursday night service as you describe it, then odds are they're not going to come to your door.
Oh, I love that.
So for $100, you've done the work, so you don't have to go out and get musicians and get it all there, and then be all disappointed because nobody showed up. You're like, yeah, you could have done it for $100 and figured that out.
That's beautiful. I love that.
And that's what we call the minimum viable prototype. How you take an idea and you break it down to, like, how do I prove whether or not the core of this is true? We've heard a lot about social enterprise, and people want to start a cafe, or they want to do this, or a school, or this, that, or the other. Like, perfect. I'm all for it. Test it first. If you're going to start a school, before you go and build construction and all that, put a banner outside that says, school coming, find out more information, go to this website. If nobody that drives by is going to your website, or you run some ads and nobody goes to the website, make sure that there's a market there before you go out and actually build a school, right?
Yeah.
And the difference is, you spend $100 or $200 versus, oh, I spent $50,000. And this is why people have been afraid of trying for so long, because they think we're betting the house. We're putting it all on this, and you may have to. There's a time to do that if you believe that it is right, and your research tells you this is right for us. If you get a lot of people that signed up for the website and are coming, you're like, yeah, this is the one we're going to invest into, and then you do it, but prove it a little bit first.
Yeah. So, like, so you have a lot of support on this. I mean, you have 2 deans or 2 seminaries behind this.
Yeah.
There's General Theological Seminary and Virginia Theological Seminary, and it's actually engaged the National Episcopal Church. In great conversation. How do you join TryTank, and then how do you think about an experiment? How was that process?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, anyone can go to trytank.org. That's TRYTANK.org and sign up for our newsletter. And you can even see our latest newsletter on there. And that's how you sort of find out what we're into. We are always looking for partners when we're doing this work. And we do it in two ways. One is we look for congregations to join us and be. So right now, for example, we discovered by doing the research that, when the Episcopal Church is only 2% Latino, and we know that the year 2045 is coming, hopefully, and that year is when this country becomes a minority majority country. And we're 2% Latino. So we're like, okay, we need to grow in that. We need to reach more people. Even if you don't look at it as just as numbers, the Great Commission says go out and find them. So there's a theological part of this as well, right? So how do we do that? And we've been looking, it turns out that 72% of the Latinos in this country are either monolingual in English or prefer their information in English. So all this time that the Episcopal Church has been saying, we can't do Latino ministry because we don't speak the language, good news, neither do they. They want it in English. So this is great news for us, right? So we're trying some experiments with that now. And so we're always looking for congregations to do, for example, with that one, we're like, who wants to try this? Who's surrounded by Latinos that wants to try this? And we have like 6 congregations working with that. So that's one way that you can be a partner with us. Another way that you can be a partner with us is if you've ever had a what if question. Yeah. All of us who love our church or who are in ministry have at one point or another said, what if we did that differently? What if we, moved that over there? What would happen if we did fill in the blank? We've all at some point or another thought it. I think that that's the Spirit stirring us to want to try and adapt, as you were talking about, Jeremiah, right? God is still with us in this messiness that we call COVID, in this world that we don't know exactly how it's coming together. Yeah, God's still here. So God is still stirring us to look at different ways. So anytime that you've asked, what if? That's possibly an idea that we could try. So I'm Lorenzo at TryTank.org. That's my email. I respond to everyone who reaches out. I'm a staff of one. Oh, except I do have my emotional support llama. When you work alone in an office in innovation, everyone should have an emotional support llama. So, and I respond to everyone, and that's how we get ideas. I don't have all the great ideas in the world. They come from people. They come from the church, the wisdom that's out there. So anyone who wants to can just follow our work. You can do that by our newsletter. It comes out once a month only, so we're not going to inundate you. And 2, you can always give us ideas, or if you're at a congregation, certainly we want to partner with you to do experiments.
Well, you know what, Dave or Ben, who's the producer of the show, why don't we put up on our screen right now the contact information for Lorenzo and TryTank. I think that would be really good. And I think also, and maybe Lorenzo, maybe you could put it in the chat.
Sure.
That way, while we're talking, they could put it up as well. The other thing is, there it is.
But that's my personal one. So,
okay. So it's but while that's happening, I actually, it's interesting that you're saying this because I have a what if question myself.
Yay! Those are my favorites.
So the other day, or not, a month ago, we were doing a men's club event, and we had all these guys coming in, and then we moving from 3 services down to 2 before COVID, and we adjusted. And we did our main services is 10 o'clock. And then afterwards, we have a Sunday school program. And so right after, like towards the end of this men's club thing, we're cooking spaghetti and everything like this. And they were also imbibing a little beer and everything.
Truth is coming now.
4 guys come to the senior warden and me and say, hey, look, we want to ask you if you could consider doing something different, because we have young families and we can't spend the whole day, 3 to 4 hours. It's like almost 3 to 4 hours on Sunday, and we've got sports, we've got work, kids are, and we're all stressed out with COVID, and we don't have any family time. So we're wondering if you could do a service in between, like a 9 o'clock service that's somehow a little different and imaginative. And then And so the question is, what if we do a 9 o'clock service? What if it is something like an hour? What if we could somehow incorporate Sunday school experience in a way, because our Sunday school numbers have dropped a little bit. It's precisely because of COVID. And even then we've had demographic changes in this place. And although we're growing and we're one of the fastest growing in our diocese, the numbers of Sunday school students have, if we look at the trends, it's going down because there's a lot less kids, but we're not reaching them as much. And so the thing is, the idea about the model of Sunday school, how to do it. So the question is, how do we say what if? What's the what if question for us?
Oh yeah. So in the book we go with two questions, right? One question is how might we, and then which is how we go from the what if to the actual, something we can actually do action with, right? Mm-hmm. So you're still at the what if, which is brilliant because you're still in the discovery time. So there's a couple of things that I would suggest that you do. One is that you sit down and talk to those parents who talk to you, because it takes a lot of guts, by the way, to come up to say that to someone, because they know, but they trust you enough to do this. So that's great. So go back and talk to them and say, like,
I actually think that's the work of the Holy Spirit. Those four guys, I say, God, this is God working, because they came to us.
Absolutely. Yeah. So talk to them and ask them, great, I love your idea. What would it look like? When you say something inventive, something different, what are you imagining? What sort of thing? Then beyond the parents, and we're actually working on an experiment called Reimagining Youth Ministry, where we go in. I did this with a congregation in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I went in for 3 days actually. One day was one day I did a day of focus groups where I just talked to kids. They were sitting around the table. I led them through this thing. So I got to tell you, and it's called Reimagining Youth Ministry. I thought, they might give me maybe like 20 ideas, right? When we were moving through their knowledge, I got a lot of information. When we got together the day after, and we were actually, okay, from what you told me, this is what I was able to find out. And I gave them sort of information. I said, this is what reports are telling us. Does that sound legit to you? I'm talking to youth here. I'm not talking to parents, I'm talking to youth. And then I said, okay, now that you know this, let's come up with ideas. What would it look like? What would our goal is to make you disciples. That's all we want. Everything else is whatever you wanted. And we walked them through this method, and in 5 hours, I thought they were going to give us like 20 ideas. They were literally, I wish I could have shown you the pictures. They were literally putting themselves on each other's shoulders to put the Post-its. That's how many ideas they had on the wall.
Oh my God.
That they were coming up with. They have ideas.
And they're jazzed. Right. And they're energized.
The rector was like, I have never seen anything like this in my entire ministry. I saw my kids going from consumers to leaders in the span of hours. And to this day, they're still super excited about what they created. Now, this might work. The ideas that they came up with are very specific to North Carolina and to Charlotte and to that church. But what happens if you ask your youth, what would a service for you look like? What would it feel like? And tell them, give me an example. What does it feel like? What you just said this. What does that look like and feel like? Give me some emotions. Find out from them. Now with that knowledge, you can sit there, pray with it, and be like, all right, Holy Spirit, what do we do with this? How do we put it together? And I have a feeling that you will feel the energy and the sense of like, this feels right. And that's how you know.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Lorenzo, I'm just enjoying this conversation.
Thanks. Can you tell that I love talking about this? I don't know if it's coming across. Me and the llama.
Well, you've got the llama. I got my cup of coffee.
Oh, I got one of those too.
So, so this program, what we have here, Food for Thought, is only like a half-hour program, but and it's one of those things that that we kind of just fell into because of the pandemic, right? Yeah. I mean, now it's in 43 different countries, 16 different languages. It's being translated, and it just it's really well, that's the thing. I always say, hi, Mom, to India. She's in India.
Hola. Bonjour.
Bonjour. but it's like, but you know what it is the the thing is it we fell into this, right? And so the question, the one that you asked at the very beginning of our conversation, is something that I heard, which was, well, what do we keep? What do we don't keep? What is it, what is it that we continue to engage in because we're connecting? Incidentally, we're connecting with more people, I mean, that were sick and shut in than we ever did before. I mean, even though we were doing pastoral work and going over there and having our lay Eucharistic visitors and so forth, but with this, we're having, 39 people, 30 to 39 people for the compline service and morning prayer each week, which
Wow.
we only had like 10 people for an in-person service before.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
And our services on average Sunday attendance is up to like 292. About 112 of that is in person, and then the rest is online, and they stay through the full service.
Really?
We're very conservative about this, so there's a connection that we're making.
Yeah.
And so the question is, how do we continue? Should we continue? That type of thing. And even this program.
There are in the book I talk only about 4 different frameworks of discovery, but I would encourage you to enter a phase of discovery, which is also a phase of discernment. It's like if you were knowing where we are now, knowing what we know now, would you still start it again today? That's how I would look at, like, the most basic way of looking at it are like the things that we've added, and you can enumerate all of them, right? That we added during the pandemic. Which ones would I still start today, as opposed to which ones that I started with when we first sort of did this, right? Just because we needed to remember when we were all like, oh, 2 weeks of lockdown and then everything will be fine. 2 weeks to eradicate this thing. It's like 2 years later, it's like, are we done yet? Yeah, so
I hear you.
Exactly. And you don't necessarily want to keep doing everything. You just because you got on the lifeboat when you needed it doesn't mean that that's what you're going to keep sailing in, right? You need to be able to figure out, is this something that we would still do? If not, then how do we do a beautiful ending for it? Said this served this purpose during the time, but now it's time to move on to something else. Now it's time. We don't have all the energy all the time. We have to be careful not to burn ourselves out, not to burn our volunteers out. I've heard a lot from other pastors that they're telling me our volunteers are burnt out. Just like I get paid to show up here. They're like, I just need a break. And I get it, right? Yeah. So how do we talk to people that way? How do we walk our way with them? So together, I would never say to anyone, any rector, anywhere, just like, you decide what to keep and what to close. You just cross off things now. Together in conversation with those who are benefiting from it. One of the things that I discovered from digital church that had started during the pandemic, and it was almost a passing comment that somebody mentioned to me. They're like, I was telling them, so what do you think of church? Are you still getting the same feel of it? It's like, and this gentleman, he was mid-70s, like, it's good to have a plan B. And he just kept talking. I said, could you just go back for a second? What do you mean by plan B? It's like, yeah, sometimes when you're a certain age, you wake up and like your leg hurts a lot or something, and you can't go to church. So you either go to church, which is your social outlet, and you're going to be in this painful thing in church and you're going to be grumpy, or you miss out on it. But now it's good to have a plan B, that I can stay at home and still feel like I'm connected. I had never thought about that. So I went and I did some research, discovery, and it turns out that about 2/3 of people over 60 at some point or another have some sort of mobility issue. Yeah. 2/3. Now you've created a plan B for them without even thinking about it. We didn't set out to do this, but now we have. So that's a sort of like, okay, if you're doing that, then great, right? And if you're doing it well and enjoying it, if it gives you life, keep doing it, think about it. I am the first proponent to say not every church should be doing digital church. Yeah. If it is not what you want to do, we have 6,000 congregations of the Episcopal Church in the U.S., 1,730 of them have 29 or fewer people on a Sunday. Most of those don't have the bandwidth, literally and figuratively, to actually keep doing digital church. So if it's someone around you that's a 29-person church, if we end up going to a lockdown again, send them to your church. You're doing it well. It gives you life. You're putting all this time, energy, effort into it. Then do it well. And when we're in person, come to our little church. That can be a thriving, beautiful little church. But not everybody has to do everything, right? There's different expressions of it. So that's what I would do. I would look for a framework that helps us. And I think that this framework, as if though you were starting it again, can help you think through and be like, is this something that we should still keep doing?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great process. I think it's a great thing. And I one of the things that I never imagined, you went to General, and I did too. I never imagined when I would be, when I went to General, I'd be doing like a talk show type of thing.
We all became televangelists in March 2020.
I know. But the wonderful thing about it, that is almost, that I find kind of refreshing, is that I get to speak with people like you, people who can give us wisdom. And you're speaking from California now, right?
Yes.
And I'm in Rhode Island, and here we have this conversation. It looks like we're just right next to each other.
Indeed.
And
although you probably have a little bit more snow than we do in Palm Springs.
We don't have any snow today, but oh my God, Palm Springs!
It's 77 outside.
I'm jealous. I'm envious now.
It's the things we do for Jesus. I'm just saying, I do it all for God. Amen.
Amen.
In a very televangelistic way. Amen, brother.
But the life affirming thing is that I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying this ministry a little bit, and so we did it initially to connect with everyone, and it is connecting with people in our parish, and it helps people. But it's also, I'm finding that it's also energizing me, and so that's an interesting thing. And I love that. I love the little thing. If it doesn't burn you out, if it gives you energy.
If it's giving you life, then my guess is that this is the way that God is recharging you.
Yeah.
And that is in and of itself a good enough reason to keep doing something, by the way. Because if you're energized by this, then when you actually go and preach on the fourth Sunday about Jeremiah, you will remember this conversation, and it'll be life-giving to you. And so your sermon will be life-giving to those who are listening. So I think that it all sort of relates to one another. So if it's giving you life, keep doing it.
Yeah. Well, I am just so grateful to God that we have people like you, Lorenzo, in the church, and doing good work and helping us to kind of engage in our challenges so well. We usually end after about a half hour. I could talk to you, I think, for about 2 hours, 3 hours, no problem.
We'll get together for coffee in February.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Definitely. I want to thank you again for being with us and for the work that you do. We're grateful for it.
Well, thank you. No, it is my pleasure to be with you all. I hope that one day I get to visit your congregation in person, be with you all, and just it sounds like it's a fun place.
It is a fun place. It is a fun place.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lorenzo. God bless you.
No, my pleasure. Have a wonderful day. God bless you all.
All right, great. Folks, just another great thinker and person with great insight who we just had a conversation with, and I thank God for Lorenzo, and thank you, Betsy, for tuning in to us. As is our tradition now, we are going to end our time with a prayer, and this is a prayer that's one adapted from one written by Bishop Thomas Brown of Maine, and we will invite Thomas Brown over for our conversation one day, and so we're looking for the Rock, Thomas Brown, and the presiding bishop. That's who we're looking for. We had some other great folks, but we're looking for those three. And so hopefully we put that out to God and the universe. But anyway, the Lord be with you. Let us pray. Jesus Christ, you travel through towns and villages, curing every disease and illness. At your command, the sick were made well. Come to our aid now in the midst of the global spread of the coronavirus. Heal those who are sick with the virus. May they regain their strength and health through quality medical care. Heal us from our fear, which prevents nations from working together and neighbors from helping one another. Be present with those in authority who are making hard decisions. Support the medical professionals, emergency responders, counselors, and our caregivers. We ask this all in your name, Jesus. Amen. Join with me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever and ever. Amen. Friends, go in peace to love and serve God. Spread the light of Christ to the world around you. The world needs it right now.
Thanks for watching. Did you know that you can join Christ Church from anywhere in the world? If you're feeling connected to what we're doing, email us today at communicate@christchurchwesterly.org.